everyone has the ability to make an impact, and here's how you can make an impact. So we're overhauling a lot of our department metrics to make sure that people feel and see that they are impacting the company. Because at the end of the day, we go home, you almost spend more time, I think you do spend more time at work than you do at home. And if you're not feeling like you're making an impact, then it's just such a slog, a constant daily slog. And that's not fun.
A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari Santiago, President, CEO of IT Direct. Welcome to another exciting episode of Made in America. I'm with Jill Mayer, CEO of Bead Industries. It's a really exciting story about a fifth-generation manufacturing company with an amazing history, been in business over 100 years. I can't wait to share the story and all of her background. Jill, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
So we have a couple of divisions. It's a family company, fifth generation. So McGuire Manufacturing is in Cheshire, Connecticut, and they are a manufacturer of commercial plumbing fixture trim.
Right.
So everything under the sink it's not plastic PVC like in a residential. It's chrome, P-traps, elbows, that kind of thing for casinos and hotels.
Okay.
And our electronics division is in Milford, and that is we manufacture electronic contact pins for the automotive industry, the lighting industry, specialty medical products, and we use an alternative process called swaging, which is it's an alternative to stamping and screw machining.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, let's get into a little bit.
Okay.
So that's the what we make. Why do we make it, and how do we get there? I mean, it's been a fifth generation business, 100 years in the making, or over 100 years. I guess we're at 106 this year,
106.
right? So let's get into that. Like, how did Bead Industries get started?
Well, it's actually a really neat story, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's kind of incredible with the whole. I don't know if you saw that movie that came out with Edison and Westinghouse. It's called Electric War, or it's called The War, but it's about electricity.
Right. The difference between like DC, AC, or whatever.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And it's Edison and Westinghouse kind of battling it out. So
for who would be like the standard for electricity.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. So my great-great-grandfather, his name was Waldo Calvin. Actually, my great-grandfather was Waldo Gerald. 3 Waldos. But they all went by their middle name, Lord knows why,
okay.
right?
Okay.
Waldo wasn't a good one. So Waldo Calvin started as a machinist, an apprentice. So it's interesting that it starts out with apprenticeship, because I know that's
a big topic.
It's a big topic. So he started out as an apprentice, which inspired him to enroll at Worcester Polytechnic. He graduated from there, started working at Thomas Thomson Houston Electric, and a year after that, patented the first fully enclosed electric switch, which was...
Wait, your great, I think it was 3 greats, grandfather is the one that patented the first fully enclosed electric switch. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay.
So before that was the...
it's pretty cool.
The knife switch. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The knife switch had exposed conductors carrying a live current. So it was sketchy. It was really sketchy. Sounds
dangerous.
Yeah. So
you could turn on the light and possibly lose your life all at the same time.
Exactly.
All right, cool.
So people were, careful to adopt it initially. But so he incorporated Bryant Electric. His parents mortgaged their home for $1,000. Started Bryant Electric in order to manufacture the switches, the electric switches.
And is this the 1914 beginning of this company, or is
nope? This is 1901.
Okay. 1901. Okay.
So then he develops 500 patents over the years, and basically Calvin's main contribution was the adoption of safety and performance standards for electrical distribution hardware. But what happened was, where we get into Bead Industries, is Bryant Electric was expanding and doing well, and he needed capital. So he went to Westinghouse, who bought controlling interest in the company. He stayed on as a board member, an exec, and an engineer, but he essentially wanted to continue inventing. So then he was, cavorting with people like Harvey Hubble and Carl Simon,
Yep.
and and Hubble had invented the the bulb, the light bulb socket. So my great great grandfather was working with him to develop the pole socket. Now on the gas lights in its time,
Gaslight meaning the lights that you would use like a flame to turn on. It was powered by some type of gas or whatever.
Right. And so there was a beaded pull chain hanging on that would regulate the flame, brighter or dimmer, right?
Oh, okay.
So there was.
Oh, the pull chain that went like a U, like you would kind of, it was like,
Right.
like an enclosed kind of loop thing, and you'd pull it one way, which would sort of open the valve or whatever to let in more gas, or close it to let in. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. So because the gas companies were pissed that the electric companies were stealing the business, they were campaigning that it was not safe and yada yada, and so they took the pull chain from the idea of the pull chain on the gas lamp, put it on the light or the socket light pole that Hubble had patented, and so they were getting the chain from a company in Austria. And but it was really for jewelry. They were making the beaded chain for jewelry, and it wasn't strong and it wasn't reliable and quality wasn't good. So he and Gilbert Goodrich, developed and patented the swaging press that mass produced the chain, and then Bead Industries was born in 1914. So.
These are like a lot of important names, right? That are just popping up in your family history.
Right. It's really
Goodrich,
cool.
Hubble, Siemens, Westinghouse, Edison. Those are some big names.
It's really neat. And the only reason I know all of that is because on our 100-year anniversary, my father put together a book and dug into the archives and found all of this cool history. That's super, super neat.
That is super neat. And so all that was sort of happening kind of on the coast of Connecticut, where you guys kind of are now, and then like New Haven, Bridgeport, Stamford corridor, coming out of New York City. Is that really kind of where this all went down?
Right. So I think my great-great-grandfather Calvin started in Massachusetts, was moved to Waterbury, and then the Bridgeport building is where Bead
was born.
Well, Bead Chain Manufacturing Company was the original name.
The original name was Bead Chain Manufacturing. So just for for people, we probably should have gotten one of those old light switches, but for those people that probably have it, and we were talking about it pre-show, like, a lot of us still, even if we redid most of our house in our basement, oftentimes there's that pull chain where you'd like go into a closet or your laundry room or whatever, and you pull that and it kind of like clicks and the light turns on. And that's what your great-great-great-grandfather invented and created a company manufacturer right here in Connecticut.
That's right. And actually, war had kind of broke out right after that, and the military dog tags that you see for the armed forces, Canadian, U.S. armed forces, that was all our bead chain as well.
Oh, we all kind of remember those, right?
Yeah.
That's
the ID
cool.
tags.
Yeah, the ID tags. They still use those today?
Not ours. I'm afraid.
I didn't know if they still even use them at all.
I don't know.
So you guys don't. I mean, obviously the beaded light socket is probably not super popular these days. So
right, like
where
buggy
are we?
Whips.
Exactly, a little bit like buggy whips. That's right. So where are we today in 2020? If we're not manufacturing those bead chains, which is probably why it's not called the name has changed. So what are Bead Industries doing today?
So our sort of, company mantra through the years has been adapt or die. And in the 20s, we used the same swaging process we used to make the chain to make electronic contact pins, tubular contact pins for the radio vacuum tube. So, and then that just grew from there. Every time, electronic pins were needed. At the ends of those lights, the Sylvania kind of GE lights in the ceiling. I think you have some here. It looks like the pins in the end of those. We sold millions of those.
And so are you guys? And so where did that go to today? Like, what's the biggest markets that beads into today?
Oh, okay. So I would say automotive sensors is the biggest, and those pins go into molds. We're tier 2, tier 3. Our pins go into injection molds companies, and they sell it to the sensor companies. The sensor companies sell it to the OEMs like Ford and
GM and all that stuff. Okay, that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your background. I mean, you didn't even grow up in Connecticut, which might surprise some folks. Being a 5th generation business, we've had so many people on the podcast, and people in manufacturing know so many people who, 2nd, 3rd generation businesses, maybe even 4th generation, where, sort of grew up in Connecticut, kind of, doing stuff. I think David Parmalee, we talked about him. He was on talking about riding his bike around the basement where his dad had a Bridgeport and a table saw, and we've heard so many of that stuff, Chris Jewell and other people that have been on, but that wasn't your experience. Why don't you kind of share with the audience your experience?
So randomly, well, not randomly, my father grew up raised by his stepfather. So he grew up in the Midwest, was born in California randomly. But so after he graduated college, he went out to Alaska. And so that's where I was born. But he really didn't establish a relationship with his real father until, his late 40s. So he came to Bead very late in his career. So, we all came to Connecticut pretty, mid.
So you were growing up in Alaska. So your father didn't know your grandfather initially? Is that what we're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So he was just growing up in the Midwest, really
Raised
no
by his-
contact with Connecticut, raised by his stepfather. And then you're born in Alaska? So you're an
That's right.
Alaska native, born and raised in southeastern
Juneau.
Alaska?
Yeah. Well, I was in a town so small, we had to be flown to Juneau for a C-section because the C-section was, out of the town doctor's wheelhouse. So technically I was born in Juneau, which is Alaska state capital, obviously, but Haines was the small town I lived in.
And so you grew up in a town, like how big was this town?
Gosh, I was so little at the time. It was small. A few thousand people.
And then where'd you go to high school?
So we moved around a lot. My dad has literally had every job possible. But so at one point he was a teacher. And this is a fun fact. We were just 100 miles away from the Exxon Valdez oil spill in an Aleut village that my dad was a teacher at for 1 year. An Aleut village. It's on the Aleutian chain.
All right. Hey, listen.
Yeah.
Oh, the Aleutian Islands. Like,
yeah.
Okay. So that
was really interesting. But so we moved all around Alaska, eventually staying on the Kenai Peninsula, the Kenai River, and all the fishing and kind of the tourism is kind of in Alaska, south of Anchorage, a couple of hours.
And so what brought your dad and your grandfather together?
They sort of started rekindling after, we were born, and he would attend some family events, and they stayed in touch.
Your grandfather would fly to Alaska to attend family events?
So he flew to Alaska to go to my older sister's wedding, and that was really when they started to get closer and kind of rekindle the relationship. And my dad flew out there and visited, and he had asked previously if he wanted to come and work for the family business, and it was a no at the time. My dad was really enjoying himself, and then eventually it was a yes, and I was about to be a senior in high school, so.
Wow. So going into your senior year of high school,
right.
You get yanked and dragged, I don't know, what is that, 4,500 miles or something crazy?
Yep.
To Connecticut. And where'd you guys
There was some teenage rebellion there.
I could only imagine the stories. So where'd you guys land in Connecticut when you finally moved there?
So we were in an apartment over my grandfather's garage in Southport. Yeah, believe it or not. Yep. And then sent to boarding schools for senior year.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
What school? Where'd you get?
So I went to Pomfret. My sister Sylvia went to Williston, Northampton.
So you guys, was it weird not to be together?
No, we were ready to we were very different. So.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was 1 year, and then we were off to college anyway. So in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't too bad.
All right, man. Because I'm just thinking, dragged all the way, I don't know about halfway around the world, but certainly all the way across the continent, split up from your twin sister, new school, living over a garage. But I guess, listen, if you were
adapt or die.
It's not just for business; it's for life too.
Right.
Oh my God, that's exciting. So then, listen. So you end up going to UVM.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always thinking about coming back to be the CEO of Bead? What'd you do besides obviously have a good time and enjoy Vermont and listen to fish probably. What else did you do when you were at UVM?
So I met my husband there and graduated, and we bought a house, and we're really enjoying being there. And at some point, my father, and what's also funny is to go from Alaska to Vermont, because people are like, oh, you should be used to the cold. It felt colder. Maybe it's the moisture of the East Coast. I don't know. It felt colder to me, just saying. But so my father had reached out a few months after we got married.
Wait, just one quick second. So are we saying that the residents of northern Vermont are hardier than the residents of Alaska? Are we breaking some news here?
I don't know if I'd go that far.
It's just colder.
Right.
All right, fair enough. All right. So you meet your husband.
Yep. And we in college, and then we bought a house, got married, and a couple months after that, my father had reached out. His board of directors had, kind of put a bit of pressure on him, not urgently, but said, in the next 5 to 10 years, you need to figure out a succession plan. And so I think he must have called all of us. And my older sister, Leah, was still in Anchorage, Alaska, married and happy. And my sister, Sylvia, was in San Diego and California, and who's going to leave there, really?
Well, she did eventually.
But so where was I? So I said, let's check it out. And so we came down, and not that we haven't checked it out, but we got like a really detailed tour and a bigger understanding of the business. And I had actually been taking the board minutes on the board. So quarterly, I would come down and sit in the corner and scribe the minutes of the board. So I kind of had an understanding of what was going on, and it seemed cool. It was a matter of seeing if my husband would be willing to come down. And so we basically said, when does this opportunity come around? Never. Let's give it a year, see what it's like. If we don't like it, we come back. No big deal. And that's what we did.
So what were you doing in Vermont before you came down?
So my husband worked at a pharmacy, managed a pharmacy, and I was working as I guess I was more of a project manager, but director of operations is nice in a small company, at an online marketing consultancy. We were Google consultants. And that was when Google was just new.
Right.
So it was pretty exciting.
It was. So you helped people do like Google AdWords and kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you go from, I think by anyone's imagination, even today, kind of like new, high tech, even then, even newer, even kind of more high tech, like marketing to this company, which at the time is not 100 years old, but it's, 90s or something like that. And, and a totally like just the reverse around.
I might have cried when I left. So it was such a fun place to work.
Yeah. And so you came down here and you gave it a shot, and that was how many years ago now?
12 years.
So I guess you liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, the first thing we were allowed to do was kind of overhaul the IT, which was awesome. New computers and kind of bring them into the next century.
Yeah. So Zeppin. So talk a little bit about what it was like to work there, right? So a company that's been around for so long, and in the same family. How did they, let's just do this first. So the transition happens, and now you're coming in from out of state, really haven't worked at the company for a long time. How did your dad work, or how did leadership work to get you integrated, to be accepted by people that had been there for, a long time?
So on a board level, I'd already known the board of directors through taking the minutes. And, I think people were kind of deer in headlights initially. And my dad had said, you have to work somewhere else for 5 years. You have to work in a position that's available. I'm not going to just create a position for you. The position that was available was finance manager. Okay. So I was like, I hated accounting in college, but okay, let's do this.
Let's do it.
So we were doing product line P&Ls. I was being trained by the former controller on his way out, and was working, nights trying to understand the P&L and really understand the financials of the company. And
it's actually a pretty good way to get to understand what's really
in
going
hindsight,
on.
it was the most perfect way. And I'm glad my father had the wisdom, because I would have probably said marketing.
Right.
So it was a really good spot to start. And then, and then I kind of just took more on in that role as I moved along, and it included HR and a bunch of different things as well. So, but everyone was really supportive when we came. My husband might have had a harder time than I did, because he was working at the business as well, and he started out as plant manager on the shop floor, and it was something he was completely unfamiliar with. We both were unfamiliar, so we were just doing it together.
And how did you? So not only are you coming to a new, well, for you, I guess it was a little bit coming back home. For him, it's a new place. Now you guys are thrust into working together at a place you don't know. How did you guys make that work? Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, and add having babies to it, because I would go to his office and say, I need some ice cream, please. Now, no, he eventually did move over to the division in Cheshire, and that made a huge difference for us, because when you go home from work, sometimes you just want to vent a little, and that can't happen when you work together, because you say, well, I don't know, I don't see it that way. Susan's very nice,
and you're like, not to me, she's not. Exactly. Yeah. So how long was he in? How was he working at Bead, and then when did he move to McGuire? Okay.
7 years, and then that was right about the time that my father retired, and I took over his role. So.
And how was that transition set up? Was it? Did he kind of phase out immediately? Was there a bit of a transition period?
Well, I should mention that when he came to work for his grandfather, who, remember, they rekindled their relationship. He was handed the keys, and his father left. My grandfather.
Immediately.
Immediately. So
here.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
And this was at the 4-story Bridgeport building with 100 employees. My dad figured things out. Streamlined the organization, leaned up, moved us to a 1-story facility in Milford, 50 people. And And I think he's thought at that point, I'm not going to do that to my kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a tough way to. That's a tough way to do it.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So we had lunch every day, and he would tell me when I wasn't eating my crusts, and so, there was some stuff where it's like, all right, Dad, let me do this, and I know people. I've talked to people who it takes them a lot longer for their. And maybe it's not necessarily that their father or mother doesn't feel comfortable leaving. It's their retirement too. It's their livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
So, my dad, when I believe he left, I'm pretty sure he left a few years before he even planned to. That's how comfortable he felt, and that's how good he felt. I mean, I still had the board, you know. So.
And how helpful? I mean, was your dad still part of the board?
He's still chairman of the board, so he'll attend the meetings.
So he's still somewhat involved. Like, how does that? So what's the relationship?
As involved as you can be from Arizona in the wintertime. So.
Yeah, so not that super involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, talk a little bit about the actual, transition. So, I mean, now you've come up. So you've been in finance. You were in finance. You had some HR responsibility. Were you ever involved, kind of in operations, or that really never came?
No, not really in operations. We had a strong president that handled operations and sales, and so I didn't get too deep in that. I mean, I went. We had trade shows I went to in Germany. I went to South Korea, where we have a supplier partnership kind of out there. So I was exposed to those kinds of things, but I didn't spend a lot of time in those. It was more, different corporate activities, and then, working with the executive team on issues.
What do you see as CEO of Bead Industries today? What's your core role?
So I really work hard not to get involved in the day-to-day. I mean, I have to slap my hands sometimes. I really do. But I think it's important for me to kind of lead the vision. I mean, I think you were talking to David about EOS and traction.
Mm-hmm.
You have your visionary, and then you have your integrator. Mm-hmm. I'm trying not to be both of those, because it's a much easier when you're not. And I think trusting your people to do their jobs and my father modeled that for me, if you think about it, because he trusted me to do my job. And so I, in turn, will trust others. And I think that's how we built the team we had. I did want to mention, when you said, what did it look like when we first moved, when Kevin and I first came down to the company, we were the only people under the age of 60, I would say. And I've said this before with millennials, sometimes it takes one to get one. Right. Our average age now for the company is 45.
Right.
So, and that, we initially didn't really skew the average at all. So it's cool when you bring young people. Obviously, my sisters then came and joined the company a couple of years later. And then it's really turning into an energetic company. And we have tons of generations in the company. So it's exciting.
So I want to actually go back. I write a couple notes because I do want to get back to talking about how you got your sisters here and that transition from that older generation to the younger, because I think that's something a lot of manufacturers in Connecticut are facing right now, right? With the silver tsunami, we're going to see a lot of people have to kind of change out some of the old guard just because they're going to want to retire with some newer folks coming in. So I think there's some good stuff to dig into there.
Right.
But before we do that, I just, a lot of people have talked about EOS and traction. You're the first one that really brought up sort of the visionary and the integrator. But I think I want to just kind of pull on that thread a little bit about, you mentioned empowering your people and talking about that. And I think there's a lot of phrases, business phrases that get tossed out there. And I think empowering your people is one of those phrases, which is awesome, but I think it's hard to execute.
Right.
So I'm curious, you said your father modeled it, which is awesome. What were you able to pull from what he modeled that you've been able to do to show your people that you trust them, to give them the power to make those decisions?
Right. So I think when you're senior level exec, it's the right hire, but when you're empowering others in the organization who are maybe middle management or kind of, doing other functions, empowering can be a scary word because it's really a judgment call, right? You want them to be able to handle things except for the stuff that you want them to run by you and to know the difference. Yep. And I think what that really takes is trusting that it will happen, and when it doesn't, explaining why maybe in that instance that wasn't the right call, and involve me in those. And then it's just back and forth. But then after you say, ooh, I really wished I had been involved in that, then you start getting all the stuff you don't want to be involved in again. So it's a push-pull until you get that happy medium where the judgment call is there. Does that
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So, I mean, so do you have any, if you're going to try and explain to someone or teach someone how to do it, I think a lot of people are comfortable. Maybe we all do it to different degrees of success, telling someone, hey, you could have done that differently. Maybe ask this question or that question. I think where we often struggle, or where I see people struggle, and it's been a struggle for me, is when then it becomes the other direction. And then trying to help people to say, well, you didn't need to ask me that. You know what I mean? How
Yeah.
do you have any tips for how you've been able to kind of execute that balance to get to that middle ground?
Usually it's one of those things where they come to you and say, what should I do here? So we'll come back with your proposed recommendation.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because, just like in the factory floor, we're changing the process of, we're not going to think for you. You can think for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you're scaling up, people to have higher technical skills for some of the automated equipment that's coming in. So it's similar in the office side, I think, where I don't know. Did I answer that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, do you have a technique? Do you think of it in a certain way? Like, I mean, I don't know. Just if you maybe had an experience that made sense, or anything that you could.
I guess I heard this phrase. It's called carefrontation.
Confrontation.
You're confronting them.
Yes, that's a new. It's like voluntold, but
Right.
a nicer one. Yeah.
Right.
Carefrontation.
So,
wow.
are you open to this feedback? Here's kind of what this would be easier if you came with a proposal. I think that, you've handled things similar to this in the past so well. Remember when you handled X, Y, and Z? You can handle this. I would love it if you can kind of do the legwork and bring a recommendation, and then we can go from there. I don't know.
That's a really nice way that's a really great way to do it. I love how you kind of turn that phrase around, right? You're taking some experience where they've done something positive. And I think that's such a great way to empower someone, right? Is to acknowledge the thing that they've done well and say, hey, take that thing you did well and try and apply that again here. And we can do this together. And then you can kind of get off on your own a little bit. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that how are you using EOS in the organization right now, and how deep are you into implementing?
So, and that's my fault for bringing it up, but we're pretty fresh on it. We're still, we've read all the books.
Sure.
We done the 90-minute meeting, and we're just kind of kicking things off.
So what made you decide that it was time to kind of do some type of, they call it, right, the entrepreneur operating system or whatever. What made you think it was time to do something like that?
So
versus, I don't know what you've been doing for 106 years.
Right. Well, it's everywhere, but and people say, it's nothing new, but it's presented in a really organized, efficient way. And I think it's kind of like the new lean, but not on the shop floor, maybe when you lean the office. What happened was we didn't think we really needed to do it initially. And then we said, let's try it. And then when we started to do the to-dos and the rocks and all that, how they compartmentalize the different processes, because we have, we're smaller, we have limited resources. We have 1 million projects we want to do. And we started having weekly
By the way,
priority.
I just imagine that bigger companies with bigger resources just have 10 million projects, right? So
but they have 10 million people doing it. So one
well, right, but
person.
I guess I'm always thinking your eyes are always bigger than your stomach.
That's true.
Right,
That's true. And so we started the priority meetings to say, okay, let's make sure everyone understands the priorities because they keep changing, right?
Yep.
So we say them and then they change and then someone doesn't know that they changed. So the weekly priority meetings. And then we decided, okay, we can have those priorities and then also work on some of these other things. And it's tricky to try to manage what things should we be working on while we're also focused on this, this, and this. And so it's a really good tool, I think, for that. And that's what we want to use it for. So we just want to get better at it.
So if I was just to sort of summarize that, if I'm someone thinking, should I look at some type of, EOS or some system to manage and lean out my office, I think it was a great way to approach it. What I kind of heard you say, and I think I agree with this, is when you feel like there's just too many different priorities, and not only are they maybe not organized, but even if they're organized for the CEO, if everyone down the line doesn't understand what the priorities are and when they change, how to change with them, then we're not really getting the whole organization in alignment and we're leaving some effectiveness on the table.
Right. I would even actually go more detailed, and this will help, I think, manufacturers in Connecticut. I know a lot of manufacturers that are due to upgrade their ERP system. Okay. You have to clean up a lot of data when you do
past due?
Way overdue.
Right.
Yes. As we once were. And it would have been really helpful to have all this stuff organized beforehand. But if you don't, you're really going to need to use this tool after it. Right. So, the ERP thing really threw us for a loop. We knew it had to be done. We waited too long. And then, you have decades of data that you're trying to transfer into a system. And it's It's grueling.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to actually pull on this. It's not a topic that we've delved into in any like real depth, but I agree with you. I think it's so important. I've been fond of saying that, the companies that invested in sort of lean and shop floor technology and all that really were the companies that have survived through like the 80s and the 90s. And I believe it's the companies that invest in information technology and I 4.0 that are going to be the companies that will survive over the next 10, 20 years. And so many companies struggle. And I think they do fall behind because it's so daunting and it's like people envision pain and it costs money and all that. So I guess, can I ask you just really candidly, why did you wait too long? And what made you finally do it?
So we finally did it when Kevin and I came to the company and said, what is this old system? You couldn't put an email address in the field. So there was a contact field and we would put, Ari at ITD.
And it wouldn't do it.
And there was not enough characters for us to put direct.com. So you would be like, I think his company's at IT Direct. So maybe it's itdirect.com. It's a total guess.
Right.
So there was no CRM, I guess is the point. So everything was in an email.
Well, listen.
But how do you
if you can't put someone's email into an ERP, I think we all know it is way too late.
But why we waited before that was because we were using Sightline, which is now Infor. And we went from, I think we were at 7. Anyway, when you switch to the next version, the language changed from Progress to SQL, and it messed a bunch of things up. So it was just a hard stop there. So it was either switch to the new language or switch to a new system, and at that point. So then we just stayed. You know what I mean? We'll
pain.
stay.
Well, you envision pain, so you were like, well, we'll just stick here for a while.
Yeah.
And pain delayed is only worse pain when you finally have to do it. And we've seen that all the time, right? Go to someone and who's on that old. So we actually just helped somebody recently who's on that old Sightline system and trying to help them get off it. And it's the longer you wait, the harder it gets.
And I've never heard anyone find the perfect system.
No.
Because it's what you put in and it's what you're willing to do.
So when you did it, tell me about the process you went through to choose the new ERP, and are you happy with the process that you followed?
We evaluated a number of companies. We took it seriously. I think we spent 6 months. I mean, we fully met with, chose the final 3, demoed all that stuff. We had issues sometimes with unit of measure, or I'm trying to think of some of the things that were deal breakers. Oh, we're on standard costing. A lot of the systems are on actual costing, so it matters. It has to work for your business. The system we ultimately chose, I think we probably could have found a similar one. But I mean, it is working for us now. It's just taken a little while. And
so when you think about how you implemented it, what were some of the lessons learned? What are some of the things you were really happy with how you implemented? Sounds like the process you went through, you're very happy with that. What were some of the things you were really happy with in the way that you implemented? And you can imagine what's coming, the other question after that one. So.
How we were happy with we were slow and steady, and we got buy-in from everyone, and we made sure that people were using the system beforehand. We testing everything, so I think it was very structured, and everything was considered.
And how did you staff it? I think one of the mistakes I've seen, and I don't know if you either fell into this trap or didn't feel like it was a trap. A lot of times I feel like people don't give it enough attention from like a staffing perspective. Like once we buy it, the system's just going to install itself. And there's so much work that has to get done. And then there's training, by the way, as well, which is a commitment that has to be made, right? And it's painful because you're going to have to take people off the line, and it's a whole new training, and you have dual entry at some points.
It was a husband-wife duo.
And
I was like, I think 7 months.
The Kevin and Jill show?
Yes. I was 6 months pregnant when we went to the kickoff, consultant, the kickoff ERP, class in Chicago. And so it was interesting.
So you guys decided to take that on yourselves.
Yeah.
And
we were pushing for it because we knew a change really needed. That was where we had zoned in on, wow, that really needs to go.
And so was that really was the two of you primary role initially to get that transition to be successful?
Then I went on maternity leave, and Kev was by himself, was on his own. And then my sister, who has an IT background, had moved, and Kevin
back from San Diego.
And they were working together. And at some point, Kevin moved over to McGuire. So then it was my sister Sylvia.
Right. So then Sylvia really took the reins.
Was
on
left
that.
with the aftermath. So.
Here you go. Fix this.
Sorry about that.
And so when you look back and think, when we do this again in the future, right? Because there'll be another upgrade at some point, or someone else who's out there listening and they're about to go through it. What are some of the things that you learned that you wish you had done differently?
So nobody wants to do the parallel, right? Because you're entering it here and you're entering it there. I don't think we needed to do it for a year or 6 months, but we might have considered doing that for the first couple of months. What was the other thing?
What was the value of what would have been the value of the parallel?
There was good 6 months of missing history and data, and just there was a black hole because something wasn't set up right and we had to go back and adjust. So it was a bummer.
Yeah. And plus, I also feel like it is a lot of extra work, but then you actually have like a control, and right, everyone knows how the old system works, right? So if at the end of the week the reports don't line up, most likely the old system is the right system, and
we might have overlapped a week or two, and then thought things were good, and then pulled the trigger, and then some stuff that didn't really push through appeared. So I would say that. If you think a week or two is enough, no. There's definitely overkill, and then there's
but
under.
it was so you felt like you would have done a longer dual entry system to be able to make that happen. What else?
There was one really glaring one I was thinking of. It was when we uploaded the data. We really didn't want to manually enter any of the bill of materials. We had so many, and we have a lot of products, and but we ended up uploading them and then having to rework them every single time. So it actually turns out would have been easier just to manually enter them.
Yeah, sometimes
manual entry is, it's a terrible thing, but when it comes to ERP, there are some spots where you might consider it.
Just to make it a little bit easier and more reliable.
I mean, it depends on what it is.
Yeah. But in the end, worthwhile doing it. No way you would have not done it.
We had to do it.
Yeah.
We had.
And so looking forward so that you don't end up in a situation where you're so far behind, any thoughts about when it will be time, or are you really making sure you're staying up with the current
next
ERP?
Yeah. So a lot of the new ERPs, they upgrade you every year regardless. It's part of the package. Of course, it comes with an annual maintenance.
Right.
But the ERP we're on is now moving into the cloud, which is excellent.
So that way it's sort of, you just keep paying, but it upgrades itself.
It's turning into the service.
The service,
software, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Sort of the idea that, people sometimes go off of maintenance because they think like, oh, whatever, but that just starts down a bad rabbit hole. So if it's a key system in your organization, we got to kind of maintain it. So you mentioned your sister Sylvia came back for the IT thing. Your other sister you mentioned also is in the business. So talk a little bit about how that happened. So, and let's get into the idea of you guys show up. The average age is, I don't remember if you were 60 or 65. So talk about, so you get there, you guys are the youngest by like 30 years. And how does it start to transition, and why'd your sisters come back?
So they came back. One of my sisters came back when she had a child. She's like, okay, where's all the family that
Sylvia?
Okay. So that makes complete sense.
Did you guys have kids around the same time?
Yep.
Okay. Is that a
couple
twin
years.
thing?
Must be.
Right.
Our firstborns were born on the third Monday of September. How creepy is that? Weird.
There you go.
But so no, I think they kind of heard about what was going on, and it's exciting things were happening, and they were ready. They were at a point in their lives where, so my sister Sylvia named her son Dexter, which is my grandfather's name.
Okay.
And we kind of feel that who my father had reconnected with, we kind of feel like he brought us all back together, because we started in Alaska, fairly isolated, and then and then we moved to Connecticut, right? And then everyone kind of went their separate ways.
Sure.
And then we
oldest
came
sister,
back
did
together.
she ever move to Connecticut?
She never did.
So
but she was already out of the house at that point, and college grad and everything. So.
Right. But now, so all of a sudden now everyone's
back together again.
That's so
and
cool.
So we think that's really, really special.
That is really special. And how is that? Well, I want to get back to the age thing, but how has that been? Now, not only is it now a 5th generation family business, but you've got your husband in the business, you're in the business, your twin sisters in the business, your older sisters in the business. Are any of their husbands in the business?
No.
They
were welcome.
Right. And so how do you guys make that all work? That's got to be challenging.
We work really hard at it, believe it or not. We started out with quarterly family meetings that we had facilitated by someone to kind of mediate, and the initial,
like someone being, is there like someone out there that mediates for this specific thing?
In our case it was Paul Sessions from the Center for Family Business at the University of New Haven. There's another Center for Family Business at UConn I'm aware of. So they do that kind of thing.
And that's their whole thing, is to help people.
Well, they have an association and they do conferences and they do educational stuff, but they also have some of that on the side.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So the first couple of meetings were like, soap operas, tears, and,
Really?
stuff just comes out. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was just sort of this like pent up.
Well, the first set of tears was my dad coming to terms with his retirement date. You know what I mean? So, and then, along the way.
That was like kind of bittersweet, or what was?
Yeah. I think just saying it out loud moved him. He was saying it out loud, made it real, and he just wasn't prepared. It was on paper. So he just thought, there's the date. And when you say it out loud to your whole family, you're like, holy cow.
Wow.
So, but, and now I'm throwing him under the bus.
No, come on, listen.
But, things after that, frustrations with, positions, or frustrations with, dynamics, anything really goes. And by having those facilitated meetings, we weren't squabbling at Thanksgiving dinner. We weren't squabbling in the middle of the shop floor, So I think it really helped us keep things professional while we act as a family business, like our employees are our family. We don't run an act like a family business in the sense that we're bickering
right
amongst each other.
That's a really smart way to do it. When did you start? Did you only start that once your sisters came back, or?
No, my dad joined the Center for Family Business when he first started his role.
Okay.
So
when you came down, you guys were already doing these quarterly family meetings as soon as you and Kevin started in Bead?
Yep.
Oh, wow. And then when your sisters came, they joined up with that as well?
Wait, no, I misunderstood. So my dad was involved in the Center for Family Business when all of the siblings came. We reached out to Paul and said, what should we do here? And then we started those.
Okay. And do you still do that?
We do.
Oh, wow. So it's just been continually going up.
I mean, they get further between.
Yeah.
And then
well, the issues don't end, right? I mean, the challenges, because I imagine it sort of happens the same way it happens with anybody, which is something happens, you feel like it's a little bit of slight irritant, but not enough you're going to bring it up. But then you add on top of that the slight irritants at home, and then this and that and the other thing, and now all of a sudden this is powder keg and it needs somewhere to go. So.
Right, exactly. So no, it's we now attend and we say, well, I don't really have anything to talk about, and then 5 minutes in, suddenly there's a topic. So we can always find something to share, and it keeps us connected. And
that's awesome. So has that been a really key outlet to help? Do you feel, and that's critical? You feel like big recommendation?
I think if there's manufacturers out there that are running a family business and working with family members, you need to be having discussions, and you need to be having check-ins, and because it might seem okay on the surface, but there could be resentments, there could be feelings that need to be shared that just bottle up and explode at some point. Do you want it to explode on your shop floor, or do you want to explode in a conference room with the doors closed? So
conference room is my option.
Good answer.
Yeah, that's great. That's really awesome. And so let's talk a little bit move on to like how you got the age change and that whole turnover, because I think that's a really relevant current topic, and we're going to go to move on from there. But so talk about that. So you get there. Everybody's been there for a long time, I presume, and that's why there's such a high age. So how does it happen, and how did you guys make that work, the transition?
You mean of bringing in younger people?
Right.
I think a lot of it was, the family members coming in, and, the ERP system we saw. We looked at the technology, we overhauled that, a little more aesthetic appeal to the building. I mean, honestly, we sort of created a space that young people would want to come to. Sometimes I feel that older generations say they want the fresh perspective, but then when it's given, they're like, well, hold on, learn it the way we do it first, and then give me your perspective. By then, I lost my perspective on what I was going to give you that was fresh. So I think we try not to do that anymore. And, I'm trying to think of the... That's
super interesting. I appreciate that so much, because I think we often fall into that, right? We become that person, right? Who says, listen, you're going to come in here and you're going to think you got all these great ideas. Why don't you come in, just like you said, why don't you learn how do we do it first? And then by the time you've learned that, whatever you had before, gone.
I think there was a book I read, they said within the first 6 months of someone's being hired, that's when all the goodies are. And if you don't snap them up, then they're just going to assimilate in.
And they're going to be gone forever. And so how did you make that change? So you work on the facility, because I think that's a big component too.
The technology,
The technology, right? You have
the
to
website.
you have to have an environment, a presence that when someone walks in, they don't immediately feel like, wow, this place is stuck in the 1960s.
Right.
Because at that point, they're already gone. And then the next place they go to that doesn't look like that, they're in a wholly different space. I think people can sometimes undervalue just the look and feel. So that's great. And the technology, same thing, right? If you come in and the person at the front's using a typewriter,
right.
That's going to be a dead giveaway. So then after that, so you get the people in, is there conflict between the people that have been there and the new folks that are coming in?
You know, a lot of the folks that were there saw my father come in and saw what he'd done and that he cares, and that how, all of the improvements that were made and had to be done to keep the business alive. And I mean, the company's ebbed and flowed with, recessions, depressions, 100+ years. They're used to the changes, So, but I think it was Simon Sinek that said people don't fear change, they fear abrupt change.
Yep.
So, we really just reached out to each other and I mean, we have people that have been there 40 and 50 years. There were people there that knew my great-grandfather. I never even met him.
Right.
So there was a lot of nostalgia to that, and there was a camaraderie to that. I guess.
And was there resistance to the change? Was it what you said? They fear abrupt change. So this change happened sort of over time, and so you're kind of feeling like because it sort of happened over time, and people were used to change because the only thing consistent in life is change. That it just sort of happened to end up being pretty smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, when we moved from the Bridgeport building to the Milford building in I think 2001 or the early 2000s. We kind of brought everything with us. And then it was time to kind of whittle down the stuff that we brought in terms of the machinery and extra things that we didn't know we would need. So I think people saw the evolution of that, and they grew accustomed to it. Now, I don't think it was happening and maybe as frequently as it should, the evolution and the change, but it was happening. So it was, it wasn't resisted as much as you might think. Now, that being said, stuff would rubber band back as it does, right? So there's so there's no resistance to doing it. And then when you do it, like I'll give you an example, like an ERP process, right? We're going to enter sales orders this way. Great, I'm on board. I think that's a great way of doing it. Then a few months later,
you find out it's still the old way?
Suddenly it's being done the old way. Wait, what? No, we're doing it this way. So the rubber band effect happens even, and it's not intentional, but I think so.
The inertia of the old way is just so strong.
That's more powerful than the resistance in my mind. So it's a follow-up after the change.
So so I guess two questions on that, which is one, how do you fight that? And you talked about the ERP process with a purchase order entry. I'm sure there's many others. And also, how did you fight that on as you've developed new products, right? We talked about you don't make the chains anymore and different stuff. And obviously I'm sure that the types of the circuits and the size of the circuitry and what they go into and all that has changed. And you've got tons of different machines in there. I've been in the shop and some are newer and some are older. And so how do you avoid that rubber band effect, which now I'm going to use that a lot now, but I've heard it.
I thought it was a thing. It's not a thing?
It's a thing now.
Okay.
If we're breaking new things, if it wasn't available, it's definitely out there now. How do you make that happen so that when new people come in, those new fresh ideas stick and they don't, even if they get heard, doesn't rubber band back to how it was before?
How do you do that? Well, you don't get mad when it rubber bands back because it's not personal. It's habitual. So I think, and not that one would be angry, but if you're frustrated and you think it's intentional, I guess, is what I mean by that. A lot of it is, it's just like with a lean project, okay? You clean up an area or space and you 5S it and everything's good. You come back a week later and everything's a mess again. No. This is where we're putting our tools. This is how we're doing it. It's continued follow-up. It's continued until you don't go away until it gets done. Eventually, the rubber band, goes away.
Back to it just stays stretched at
snaps.
the new spot. Yeah. No, I think it actually stays stretched. I think that's so important because, listen, I see it at IT Direct all the time. I see it at our clients. I talk to people in business all the time, have this problem, which is we all realize you can't tell someone something once.
Right.
But we think it's 2 or 3 times. It's like once, but I think it's not just repetition, but it's also that carefrontation. It's such a great word. It's the way you do it. And I think it's also doing it super consistently. You can't just do it once And then if it's a daily thing, so for example, you talked about sort of the 5 S's and getting your work area, your cell back together. If that's something supposed to be done every day, but you only check it once every 3 weeks, so every 3 weeks you remind them, well, there's been 15 working days that they've been doing it wrong. So
Right.
they're only getting one right time after 14 wrong times. That's probably not gonna be a good way to change, but doing it more frequently up front might be a great way to
Yeah, exactly.
do it. Wow, that's some pretty good stuff. So, how did you get? So these people have been around for a long time, and even though things are changing, we don't want to lose that old knowledge that they've had. Right? It's the knowledge of the customer, how to do it the right way. Customers, I'm sure, buy from Bead for decades and decades. Like they don't want everything to change overnight either, because their processes rely on your stuff. How do you embrace the new people coming in? How do you embrace the change while still keeping the great stuff that's been around for a long time?
Well, there's no one answer, and it's certainly a challenge. But you have to integrate them in a way that, there's mutual respect, because even though you don't want them to learn the old way and not offer up fresh ideas, you want them to really share with each other. So a lot of what millennials really like is show me what to do and why, and why does this matter? They really want to know. They're not going to do something just because they were told to do it, versus traditionalists and boomers. You tell me to do it, fine, I'll do it. So there's more questions that are asked. So I think a lot of time it's facilitating the mentor and the mentee, the young person and the older person with the tribal knowledge, and having them really share together. And it's worked in our tool room. I mean, we've had our tool room's only 3 or 4 people, but we've had a complete change in our tool room in the last 3 years. We have nobody that was there 3 years ago is there. 100. And no, these are people that work.
No, I'm saying 100% term. I mean, it's no one that's there now was there 4 years ago.
In the tool room, plus a CNC machine. So, it's.
And so, were you intentional about this mentor-mentee process? Did you guys go through some training? Did you talk about that?
So we didn't go through training, but we'd used the mentor-mentee process before, and we had tool makers who were very good mentoring people coming up the ranks. We have a tool maker who's an apprentice who was trained by then, and then we have someone we just hired who now he's helping train. So it's kind of, I was helped and now I'm turning around and helping you kind of thing.
So if that first process was good, I can now I can just re-execute what I learned, right? I can just replicate that.
Exactly. So the mentee becomes the mentor. And it doesn't happen. You don't have to wait till they're fully there to start the mentor process. They can learn some things, turn around, and then start helping. Because, right now we have someone pretty seasoned, then we have someone in the middle, and then we have someone in the apprenticeship program. So you can't have all apprentices, obviously, in your tool room. And you also can't have all people about to retire. So
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. So I think that's a great move into workforce development. And you had talked about, I think in the very beginning, how your great-great-great-grandfather started off as an apprentice, and how it's all kind of come full circle, because we're so much into apprenticeships now, and you've just been talking about it. Your eyes lit up just now when I brought it up, that people that can see it. So, let's talk about it. Workforce, listen, it's on everybody's mind right now. I always said that it is a great problem to have, right? Versus like the other problem, which is where's all the work. So, but it's still a problem. So what are you guys doing at Bead to look at the workforce? How are you working with apprenticeships? And let's just talk about that.
So one thing I find, because I'm involved in the New Haven Manufacturers Association, as you're aware,
it's coming up, don't worry.
Okay. No, I do think people are hesitant to pay a recruiting fee. It's a tight market right now. And, first and foremost, we don't want, Sikorsky and Lockheed and people stealing, your people, but you have to keep them engaged. You have to get them involved. You have to listen to them so they don't get poached. But also, if you're out there looking to hire and you're trying to bring capable people in, whether they're young or old or whoever they are, whatever skill set they have, I wouldn't say you need to pay a recruiting fee to get someone great. I'm just saying be open to all different ways of finding people. Because if you're just doing one thing, it's going to take you longer. And so we've hired employees out of Housatonic, out of the technical high schools. We've hired out of the colleges. We've hired referrals from family members. We've done it all. We're open to it all. We've used recruiters. So sometimes if you have something really specific, we make custom contact pins. We have a custom process, and it's a niche market, and we have a specialty, unique process. So we need to have we have unique needs, I guess,
And
as
so for
do
those,
many.
of course, everyone's got some unique needs, if not everywhere, at least in
Right.
some places,
Everyone's
right?
needs, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, you just hope that yeah. So that's really interesting, and I love that concept of, just have like I'm sort of thinking of it as different like fishing poles, right? Like
Right.
if I absolutely need to catch a fish, why would I just put one lure and one hook in the water
Right.
when I've got lots of different lures and lots of different opportunities to catch a fish in a different way, and who knows what's biting this time? Are you pretty consistently recruiting? Do you guys kind of turn it off, turn it on? Do you, how do you kind of
Oh
manage?
yeah, and we have average of 2 retirees a year, and then we have just growth hires. So we lost someone 48 years after they retired. So in our tool room, and then 2 years ago, our senior engineer, our sales guy, key salesperson. So we started layering them in, hiring someone before they left to get them up to speed. And that can be really expensive.
I was about to bring that up with your finance. This is where having that finance.
That's why it's like the
intro.
recruiting fee. That's expensive too. But sometimes you either have to bring someone in and help have the tribal knowledge be transferred. Cost you're 2 people in the same position now. That's expensive. Or you're not going to just find the perfect person, or you spend the money training them and waste, not waste, but tons of people spend tons of time bringing this person up to speed versus one person.
Not only
overlap.
that, you're losing productivity the whole time, right? At least
Right.
if you have 2 people in the same role, the mentor-mentee kind of opportunity, hopefully you actually enhance a little bit of productivity. You don't lose any customer value.
Right.
You can keep your sales or whatever.
But how long do you need? I mean,
Well,
we've
that's
done it.
right. How well you
We've
tell
done
me.
it. We need 6 months to a year. Now we really only needed 2 months. Oops, So it's tricky to find the right balance.
That is
I
tricky.
think.
So how are you involved in that, in strategically thinking about that, and what lessons can you share from that?
I mean, I get involved in sort of the higher level hires. I trust my people to hire right, but I make sure that we're looking for not just skills but attitude. That we're looking for culture fit in terms of our core values, which is based on the EOS model. When I say fit, I don't mean the way someone looks. I mean accountability. How organized they are, how curious they are. What sort of things that they. So their resume doesn't necessarily show that they have all of the things that you've asked for, but does it appear that they're in positions that meet the needs that you're looking for? So.
And so when you're talking about that hiring for fit and all that, does that something that you're talking about, not on a day-to-day individual hire basis, but from a strategic perspective?
Correct.
And so how do you help hiring managers? And I don't know how you guys hire exactly, if it all goes through an HR or HR and hiring manager. And maybe we could talk about that, but how do you get them to understand that? Because that's another one of those business things that I think is very right. And everyone talks about. Much easier to say than it is to execute.
Right. Well, we bring someone in, we make sure that they meet, the right people. Well, we make sure they meet everyone, and everyone has a chance to have a conversation with that person, bring them out to the floor, have them take a tour, see the types of questions that they ask, right? See the interactions that they have, see the engagement level. Those are the basics. That's the starting point. And then, it's hard to tell if someone's organized in an interview, right? I don't know. You could say, here, organize these things. I've seen where...
Take a picture of your closet. Yeah.
Right. I've seen where people have said, here's a P&L. Tell me if there's anything fishy with this P&L
Really?
for accounting hires and whatnot. And that would work. I don't know the best way to do that for someone in operations other than maybe paint a scenario and then ask how they would. But, we've gotten better. We need to continue to get better at the hiring process because it's costly. And, it seems to take a couple iterations before, we get the perfect fit.
So how do you do the other side, right? I mean, listen, I think that no matter how hard, and IT Direct, we've tried and we've invested so much time and energy. We laughed, I think a couple of years ago. So maybe going back 6 years ago, we were really frustrated because we had about a 50%, success rate with hires. And we invested so much time and so much energy. And then 5 years later, we still had a 50%, success rate. And I think what we found to get better, and we've gotten a little bit better at that, but what we found was so important was really not so much always investing in the upfront, because to your point, there's a limit to what you can learn
Right.
in an interview process that doesn't have them working for you for a month in a trial basis and interviewing their whole family and
Right.
every person they've ever worked for, and like that we could just never do. But what we found was, and I don't know if you've seen this, is it's really all about noticing as quickly as possible when you made a mistake.
Yes.
And then fixing that mistake for the benefit both of that person and for the organization.
Right.
And so talk about that. Have you guys worked on that, and how do you execute that?
Yeah, no, that's well said. We've been learning that over the last couple of years as well. And that's why I think, and here I am bringing up EOS again, but when we were iffy, because we were like, oh, but this was done really well, and this was, let's give them more time. I think that it can happen, because you really want to give second chances, but third and fourth and fifth chances, it's a waste of everyone's time, right? So now we pull out the core values and we say yes or no, yes or no. And then if it's a no, and it's pretty glaring, it's just an easy way to depersonalize it. Because especially when you really like someone and you're like, man, I want it to work so badly.
Yep.
And it's just not gonna.
Yeah.
So we've come across that. So.
And do you guys do anything like in terms of like seeing them out the door? One thing I heard that I really love, which is you got to love them as much on the way out as you did on the way in.
Oh, that's cool.
And is there anything that you guys do, when if it happens, especially quick, I don't know about you, but it's when you're like 4 weeks in and you go, oh no,
yeah,
that's horrible. And they left the position or didn't take another job. And now you feel like,
we usually try to pay through a certain period and medical too, so that they can find another job and have that safety net. That's kind of what we do. Yeah. If there's a phone, we try to make it really easy. Yeah. And
I super appreciate
try to care,
Yeah, listen, this caring words come up a lot in this conversation. I appreciate that. No, I think that's super right. And I think, it's expensive to do that, but I think it's the right thing to do. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So, I guess we're just kind of coming up to the end, but talk a little bit about what it's like to work at Bead. What's the culture of Bead like? It's an old company, but in a lot of ways it's a really young and a new and a fresh company. What's it like to work there?
So we have we like to call ourselves nerds.
Okay.
We have a lot of fun. We have a yoga on Thursdays. It's kind of silly, but actually our machinists are the ones that do the yoga, which is really cool, and I do it with them. It's really great when they're standing all day to have those muscles stretched. But I think there's something for everyone at Bead. We've got nerdy things for the nerds like myself. We've got a real sense of respect of one another. I think I see a lot of people challenging other people, and it's very much okay at Bead to challenge something, and I love that. There's no ego that my idea was better. There's none of that, and I think that's important. So I think the feel is that we're all in this together. We all make an impact. I mean, it used to feel a little bit like, well, I'm not in sales, so I'm not bringing in the, I'm not moving the needle. I can just, doing this. And now, no. Everyone has the ability to make an impact, and here's how you can make an impact. So we're overhauling a lot of our department metrics to make sure that people feel and see that they are impacting the company. Because at the end of the day, we go home. You almost spend more time, I think you do spend more time at work than you do at home. And if you're not feeling like you're making an impact, then it's just such a slog, a constant daily slog. And that's not fun.
No, that's not fun. That's awesome. And so, what do you like most about your job?
I mean, it's different every day. Here I am today. I love...
Best day of the week.
I love being able to... kind of connect with people in a different way. I love being able to be supportive. And it's really Simon Sinek that started the servant leadership. I really look at myself as the supporting. My customers are the employees. So, and I don't mean that in a cheesy way that I walk out to the shop floor and just say, how are you? I mean that how can I make your job easier? What can I do? What can I do better so that and it's not always just about the company. We want the company to do well, but if we're not doing well, the company's not going to do well. So, how can I help you? How can I be flexible? What's going, if you see somebody maybe not acting normal, what's going on? I think there used to be a lot of water cooler talk, right? Now a lot of people are kind of in their office crunching. If you don't take the time to connect with people, I think that there's something missing there.
Yeah, absolutely. Something missing. I want to talk a little bit about NHMA.
Okay.
But before I do that, I just want to ask you this question, which is, there's a lot of people out there that may have not thought about manufacturing as a possible career. Maybe don't know about kind of the new lean, green, and clean manufacturing and still think of the old days. What kind of person do you think can be successful in a manufacturing environment in Connecticut in 2020?
I think someone truly, and I have been thinking about that, someone with a lot of grit, someone who doesn't back down from a challenge. I mean, it is a challenging state, amongst the fact that it's a challenging industry. It's a challenging state too. And so, if you've got thin skin, this industry isn't for you. But if you are solution oriented, if you are curious, if you believe in the making of things, the creation of things in this country, I mean, manufacturing is the place to be. And I think there's a lot of elements to manufacturing. So if you don't like something, there's something else for you. And I don't know if we do a great job of selling that. Quality, there's operations, there's accounting, there's so many aspects of, there's CNC. I mean, there's a lot of technical cool stuff that's happening out on the shop floor that you can get involved in with vision inspection equipment, and all of the new automation that's coming in. So it can be cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Get
It's high
involved.
tech. There's accounting, there's sales, there's fun stuff. I mean, there's
There's
yoga.
a need.
There's a need.
There's a need, and you can make an impact.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing. That's awesome. So let's talk a little about NHMA. I think trade associations are great, and you've been super involved in NHMA. So you have a limited amount of time and a lot of places you can put that time, and you've decided to put some of it with NHMA. So talk about why.
I was telling the executive director this the other day. My father forced me to do it. I said, Dad, I'm not ready right now. When I moved into his role, I said, I'm not ready right now. Can I first get myself settled? No, this is going to be important. This is going to help you make connections. This is going to help you. And so I got on the board, and I thought, what can I offer? This is, I'll just listen, And after some listening and meetings, I'm the type of person where after listening, I have a few things to say. I have a few things to add.
No, you don't say.
Just try to shut me up.
That's
Just
right.
try. And then so I spoke up with an opinion about how I thought something should be done. And the response was, well, that would be great if you could lead up that effort. And I was like, shoot, I walked right into that one. So if you have an opinion about how things should go, and you want to change things, and you go to the NHMA, chances are you're going to be the one leading that particular initiative. And I think that's kind of cool, because it's like, cool. Look, great, we agree with you. We need help. Step in and help. And so as soon as I got involved in helping with an initiative or whatever it was, I was hooked after that, because there's a need there, and there's a real community there. There's a community that's not there anymore that is there with manufacturing associations. I mean, you don't have so much the community in your towns anymore with your schools and your. I don't know what's happening on the community level, but I think we got to bring that back together. And volunteering is a great way to do that, whether it's coaching a little league team or joining the manufacturing association. Thinking
about your time at NHMA and thinking about what you or other manufacturer who's thinking about joining and what they might get out of it. Well, what do you get out of it when you look at it? What's kind of the couple of things that you feel like, man, I'm investing my time and this is what I'm getting in return?
So I really stay ahead of trends and what's going on in the industry. I don't have a lot of time to spend reading news articles. So that's kind of my plug for that. And then the other piece is colleagues in the NHMA, other manufacturers, talking about issues that I have. And do you have a similar issue? I mean, you have nobody to bounce those ideas off of. And also, I can't talk to every employee about all of my concerns. Sometimes it's nice to talk to someone at your level about the concerns that you have, and are you seeing the same thing, and what are you doing, and how. So there's a lot of best practice sharing that I think is really underrated, because you could get help. There's 5 things to try, right? Your colleagues could say, well, I tried this, check this one out. So it's almost like you can shorten the time frame that you get to the right answer with things like that, I believe. So it's been a great network of support for me.
That's awesome. Sounds like you'd encourage anybody to look it up and consider joining something like that.
For
That's
sure.
awesome. Well, listen, Jill, it's been great having you. Ready for the rapid fire round
Okay,
of
I've been
questions?
training for this.
All right, here you go. All right, here we go. Ready?
Okay.
Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Yes. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Starbucks.
When you take time off, staycation or exotic destination?
I mean, exotic.
Well, from Alaska, I guess you
Yeah.
gotta go exotic. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Can I say sporty SUV?
Wow,
can I do
you
that?
can't. You absolutely listen. You can say whatever you want. That's a new one. I like it.
All right.
If you had to do something other than be the CEO of Bead Industries, and it could be anything in the whole world, what would you be? What would you do?
This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
A cowgirl.
Really?
Like, I don't know, herding cattle, riding horses, playing guitar in my front porch. The simple life, I guess. Not to be confused with farming.
I got it.
That's
No,
way
no.
too much work.
That's right. Not farming. Herding somebody else's cattle around. I like that. Do you have a favorite business book?
I do. I was trying to think of the name of it, of the author, and but it's called Essentialism. Do you know? Is it McCown?
I don't know.
Okay, it's called Essentialism. It's great.
I will. What's it about?
Doing only the essentials. But no, just minimizing sort of the excess in your life. And it doesn't just mean the number of T-shirts you wear, but just emailing and just in general kind of saying yes to everything and that kind of a thing.
Cool.
And then The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is also
Another
a great
one.
one.
I don't know. Wow, that's good. What's one thing that you learned, Jill, early in your career, early in your life that you think has helped propel you to the success that you've had?
I've said this before on Nick's podcast, actually, but it's because of social media, and I think especially with young kids, it really messes with self-esteem. But I think we compare ourselves to everybody else, and I try to compare myself to who I was yesterday, who I was last year, who I was 5 years ago, and am I better? Have I improved? Am I doing things to move myself forward? And then I feel better about myself. If I go on Facebook or Instagram and I see someone on an exotic vacation looking fabulous, and it's really tough to turn around and say, well, I got this. So I think comparing yourself.
Do you think that was something that you learned early in life to do that?
Yeah, I think I learned that in my 30s. I wish I would have learned it earlier. Yeah.
What's something you learned later in your career or later in your life that you wish you could go back and tell young Jill that if she listened to you, it'd really make a big impact in her life?
That's a tough one. Probably listen more, like zip the lip. There's intelligent, wise people that have, nuggets of wisdom to share. And, sometimes, the quiet, you can learn.
That whole 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that
Yep.
proportion type of thing. That's great. Well, that was awesome. Just to wrap it up. Oh, but before we do that, if people want to get in touch with you, Jill, or reach out to you, what's the best way to find you?
LinkedIn, probably.
All right. Well, we'll link your LinkedIn profile up in the show notes, and people can look up Jill Mayer, JLLMAYER on LinkedIn. Bead Industries. And just to wrap it up here, we've talked about a lot. This has been a really awesome conversation. And one of the big goals of the Made in America podcast is to help people in the community learn and grow. And so if they were going to leave this podcast and they were going to take one thing that we talked about today and implement it that you think would make a real impact in their business or in their life, what's that one thing?
It's a toss-up between the ERP and the caring. I think we made our point with the ERP. Really, I would say caring, whether you're walking someone out the door, like you said, or, someone's coming to terms with their retirement, or, you're looking, someone's rubber banding back into an old process. I would just say, care about how that other person is processing that, and, it'll make it easier.
A little bit of that, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care kind of thing.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and something that I'm going to take from this as a great reminder, because I think we can always learn from it. I think from my end, what I would add to that too is I think this recruiting thing is such a big deal, and I think people are afraid to spend the money on the recruiter. They're afraid to spend the money on sort of the doubling up to see someone out and have the overlap, because that's a cost they know and they can see on the P&L.
Right.
But the cost you don't see on the P&L, or at least you don't see in obvious places, I think is 10 times.
Right. The giant gap that was left.
The giant gap. And then the thing that takes forever and the frustration and the lack of attention and everyone's not doing their core
The
job.
inefficiencies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I just love your conversation about that and the idea of the mentor mentee and really being willing to invest in the different modes of recruiting and having people overlap in a way that helps the person who's leaving feel good about leaving the company in good hands.
Yeah.
And the person coming in feels super valued. Like, wow, my position's so important. They kept the other person on to help me get there, which I think also embeds them into a culture of giving. It's awesome. I'm going to really take that and use it in my life. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jill. This was a really great conversation. I super appreciate it.
Thanks, Ari.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. You know, my goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.